my mom's, I think she just turned 87, still uses the topicals and the tinctures. And she's at the shop the other day and she's like, and I was talking to one of the customers and they're like, oh, well this, and she's like, do you smoke marijuana? And I'm like, oh no, Mom, I just eat edibles like you. I don't, she's like, okay, good. Cause I don't want you smoking marijuana. And of course I smoke a little marijuana, like it's my business, right? But it's so funny that like, I'm still lying to my parents about smoking weed and I'm 55 years old.
Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Same Business, Different Day podcast. I am your host, Zeke Corley, here at the Film Hub in rainy Vista, California right now. We've got a big storm coming, but I think all of you guys know about the storms on the West and the East Coast right now. I'm doing my best to blend into this wall. How you like me blending into this new set, Mateo? Am I invisible? You just see my face. I'm happy to reintroduce my good friend and guest co-host, Chris Ryan. Thank you for coming back, Chris.
Happy to do it.
Appreciate you being here. And as you guys know, we talk a lot about the paths that people take in business. And it's so important to us to illustrate each and every person's path because they all have their own unique story. And there's no difference today. Some people, they skip education. Some people go in deep into the education. And some people just have many, many jobs, pick up some tricks along their way and figure out what their path is going to be. Some people go into family business, which is what I eventually wound up doing. One of the businesses that I'm a part of is a family business. So we get to hear a great story today from our new friend, Mike Mellano. We appreciate you being here, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So we start from the beginning, like I was telling you earlier. So let's go way back and find out where you were born.
So I was actually born in Riverside, California.
Okay.
My dad was attending graduate school at UC Riverside. So my dad has a PhD in plant pathology. So my family is in agriculture.
Okay.
My grandfather immigrated to the U.S. in the 20s and started in first gathering greens and foliages in the Pacific Northwest and bringing them to L.A. and selling them. We would drive up to Washington, Oregon, gather all those things. They still do that today. People gather wild foliages and sell them into the commercial horticulture market. And so that's kind of how our family came to the U.S. And then my dad worked there as a kid. And then ended up going to college. First family member of our entire family to go to college.
Okay.
So bachelor's degree and then straight to PhD program at UC Riverside. He intended to go into academia and teach. Ended up joining the family business at the time, which was my grandfather and my uncle. And that business grew. So at the time it was based in Los Angeles. And then they came down to Oceanside, San Luis Rey at the time, and started a farm there. And then that's where they did it.
So did they kill his teaching dreams or did he just, did he try? Did he give it a shot?
His plan was to only help my uncle get the farm up here in Oceanside for a couple years and then go back to the university. He had teaching jobs at various universities, University of Hawaii, across the country in their ag departments, but ended up staying. And so I moved to Oceanside at age 2.
Really?
And had been, grew up in this area. So then grew up there on a farm. Started working on that farm when I was 10 or 11.
Now, did you have any aspirations before that? Just like your dad with the teaching, were you thinking about doing something else?
Not at that age, right?
Okay, you're just doing what you're told.
I was like, hey, you're going to work on the farm after school. And I'm like, really? I don't really want to do that. Mo, you're going to do it. I'm like, okay. And then summers too. And so I did that until I turned 16.
Okay.
So when you turn 16, you get driver's license, you can go work for somewhere else, right? The day I turned 16, I went to the DMV and got a driver's license, quit that job and went to work. I started working, believe it or not, at the Harbor Sweet Shop at Oceanside Harbor, the ice cream store.
Oh.
It used to be on the front side. It's now on the back side.
Yeah.
So I worked there. I think I was there close to 4 years. Then I started my entrepreneurial phase of life, where my first business was selling flowers to the Marines on Friday afternoon when they were leaving Camp Pendleton out of the Vanderbilt Gate. So my mom would take me over there and set me up because I didn't have a driver's license yet. I was maybe 13 or 14. So I went over there and I sold flowers to the Marines as they were leaving base. So I did that for a while, and then I was still working on the farm.
Yeah.
And then went to work at the Harbor Sweet Shop. Had a side business. I had a gardening business.
So you still kind of kept it close.
I always had side hustles. I always had a job.
But you're also agricultural though too.
Yeah, I guess landscaping.
Yeah.
And that started because my uncle owned an apartment building in Oceanside, and his yard guy, his landscaping company quit, no notice. So he's like, "Hey, can you cover for a couple weeks while I find a new company?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." He's like, "I'll pay you what I was paying them." So I started that. So I'm out there doing lawns and yard work in Oceanside, and people would come up to me and say, "Oh, how much to do my yard?" So I'd give them a quote. In very short time, I had like 7 contracts on 2 streets in Oceanside. So gardening business, right? Yard business.
Yeah.
And so I did that, worked at the Harbor Sweet Shop. And then, I'm going through high school, working, basically my side hustle job, my gardening business, and working on the farm. Then Harbor Sweet Shop. And then at one point, I'm doing my gardening business, and my dad came to me and he said, "Hey, the nighttime warehouse manager just quit." And it's a night shift. So it's like you start at like 3 p.m. and you go till 8 o'clock. And I had worked on that crew before. And he's like, "We need a evening warehouse manager. Do you want to come back?" And I said, "Not really." And, but I knew the job. I speak Spanish, so it works out. And we ended up making a deal. So I cut my Harbor Sweet Shop work down significantly. I still would fill in there to help out on busy times, but mostly I was working there at night.
No, I'm curious about so you got the warehouse managing job is one thing, and obviously the Harbor Sweet Shop, that's not necessarily that hardcore labor, but what was it like working on? Was that hard labor?
It's manual labor.
Yeah.
I've done everything from pick zucchini squash, pick flowers, dig ditches. The first 4 or 5 years, I was a laborer there, working out in the fields with all the Hispanic guys, learning how to speak Spanish, making friends with them all. So some of those guys still work there that I literally grew up with.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm still friends with some of the children of the people that work there. So you just kind of do that. It's hard work, hard work.
Yeah.
You don't make money without working hard.
Sure.
So. No, but that was an interesting phase of life. And then finished high school and was going to junior college, Palomar. Okay. And trying to decide what I wanted to do. Wasn't really.
So you didn't get to a point where there was some aspiration, some decision.
No,
you didn't
I wasn't
know
really sure what I wanted
path
to
was
do.
going to be. So
went in the military.
That's the decision. So now, was that your own decision? Was that somebody's suggestion?
No, I was the first person in my entire family, cousins, everybody to go in the military. So I didn't know anything about it. I went and talked to some of the recruiters, Army, Navy, Marine Corps. Didn't really want to go in the Navy. Didn't really want to go in the Marine Corps.
Now, the Marine Corps is right where you grew up.
I know. No, I know. And my stepson is in the Marine Corps now.
Okay.
On Pendleton.
Okay.
But I just, I was like, I want to do something different. So I ended up enlisting in the Army Reserves as an intel analyst.
Okay.
So intelligence. And so that sounded super exciting, I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a spy. That's what I'm thinking, right? But that's not what you are. But in your, I had no experience.
Yeah.
Nor did I have anybody that had been on a path like that could mentor me, right? So, I enlisted, I went to boot camp, and I went to Army Intelligence School, and that took about 6 or 7 months. And then I came off of active duty and got assigned to a reserve unit up in LA. And so I was doing the weekends up there, and then I transferred from Palomar College to Long Beach State. And Long Beach State had an ROTC program. So I went and talked to ROTC because I said, well, if I'm going to go on this path, I more than likely want to be an officer. So I went in the ROTC program, finished college, got commissioned as an infantry officer in the Army, and went on active duty. And so I spent, you go off to infantry officer school and some other schools. And then I got assigned to the 10th Mountain Division, Fort Drum, New York. So I was active duty infantry officer, 10th Mountain. So I did that for a few years. And, as my time commitment there was starting to wind, I was trying to decide what I wanted to do. Do I want to stay in for another few years? I was pretty sure I didn't want to do a 20-year stint in the Army. And I started talking to my dad. He's like, well, the business is expanding. We need leadership. We need people. You understand this business. You worked here a lot. So again, family business.
Sure.
And
but you were able to make your way back out of the Army.
Well, yeah,
fairly quickly.
Yeah, I had a 4-year commitment.
So your commitment was only 4 years. Right?
Well, yeah, and you could continue to extend, right? But as an officer, particularly in the combat arms, I wasn't really interested in being on a desk. So as a junior officer, a lieutenant, a first lieutenant, even as a captain, you're in the tactical units. I was a platoon leader, a company executive officer. So you're out doing the fun stuff that you see on TV.
Yeah.
After about 4 years as an officer, you have to do several years of staff and office jobs before you get an opportunity to do that again. And I wasn't really interested in being in the Army, working in an office. I wanted to be jumping out of planes, helicopters, shooting, blowing stuff up.
Is that why you got in?
Yeah.
Coming up as a kid, being so entrepreneurial, seems like, I don't know, the Army might not give you the same kind of freedom that you would have. I mean, you have to be regimented. You got to be disciplined. You got to do what your commanding officer said. So what was it about? Was it the action?
I wanted the action and the adrenaline.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what kids want, right? I was in my late teens, early 20s.
Yeah.
And you see the commercials and, and I'm like, well, I want to go do that. And so I went and did it. Never intended to be long-term. So then I'm winding down. My dad and my uncles are saying, come to the business.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know. And I was married at the time to my first wife. I was also looking at going into some of the national intelligence services. So CIA, DIA, some of those communities as well, because I had a very high level clearance from my intel time. And, that's not easy to get. So there's a lot of value in the private sector and then other government agencies for that. Didn't necessarily use that as an infantry officer, didn't need that, but I still had that level of clearance.
Right.
So I was looking at those. My wife at the time, we were talking about it. And, I had been doing that Army stuff for a while, gone a lot, doing crazy stuff. So it's tough on spouses and families.
Sure.
And, and I was getting a little tired of it too, because it's wearing. You go, I think the last 2 years I was in, I think I was gone 190 days.
Where was your action?
Well, some of them were deployments, but also just training. Like we could be on base and go out for 10 days and come in for a week or two, go out again, go to some other Army base. But I did deploy into Haiti on Operation Restore Democracy in the early 90s. We sent a carrier task force down there. My battalion and another infantry battalion was on the USS Eisenhower. And we conducted the first ever helicopter air assault combat mission from an aircraft carrier to land. Marines do that on amphibious assault ships, but the Army doesn't do that stuff. So we put all our helicopters on that aircraft carrier and did an air assault in the seize an objective and then follow on missions from there. So I was there for almost 5 months on that operation. But even training operations, you're gone. You'll go to Fort Polk, Louisiana, maybe for 6 weeks. But the lead up to that is weeks and weeks of training. So you're gone a lot.
Right.
But that's the life, right?
Yeah, right.
And so I'm looking at the intel agencies and that kind of a lifestyle. And again, I do have more of an entrepreneurial thing. So, that would have been an extension of what I was doing, different, but somewhat. And so I just decided to go try out the business for a while.
It just wasn't for you. You needed to be your own leader.
Yes. And, you have, particularly in the combat arms at the lower leadership levels, there's not a lot of oversight, right? So when there were many times where I'd be out at some forward operating base or whatever, where I was in charge.
Okay.
So, and it's, you have a lot of, there's some rules you got to follow. Don't kill the people you're not supposed to kill, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But staying in some rules, you have a lot of liberty.
Yeah.
So a lot of creativity and problem solving, which I
that's
enjoy.
good too, and you can use that in the entrepreneurial.
Yes.
And so and what I think you might also be picking up is how to take care of a good staff, having good
Leadership.
people underneath you that you know, they can help you get this job done if you treat them right, but also if you select the right people, right?
We're here to interrupt your regular podcast listening and ask you to join us at Odd Pairing Podcast.
Yes, it's Paige and I, and we are here every week now on Fridays. And we talk about adult beverages and the community, a little bit of the history of it, and we are just going on a nice little journey. And you can hear other people's drinking stories. So why wouldn't you want to listen?
That's the best part.
That is the best part.
Cheers.
This podcast is brought to you by yourinsurancekplace.com. Owning a business is hard work. You put your blood, sweat, and tears into it every single day. You need a partner who understands the ins and outs of insuring small to medium-sized businesses. For over 40 years, our California Property and Casualty Insurance Agency has insured businesses just like yours. We've seen it all, and we've learned a thing or two about what it takes to keep your business protected. That's why we offer free policy assessments. We'll take a look at your policy and let you know if there are any gaps in your coverage. Let us help you to protect what you've worked so hard to build. yourinsurancekplace.com.
And in my current business, which we'll discuss eventually here, is the staff makes it.
There's no doubt about it. I've been there.
You can have the best idea. You can be well capitalized in a market that's easy to conquer. But if you have the wrong people, you will not be successful. And so
it's a pain in the butt.
Oh, it's a nightmare. Yeah, so it's like my staff. I have ultimate loyalty to my staff. They return that loyalty, right? And that's what it's all about, is the loyalty. And they don't have to be the best people. They don't have to be the subject matter expert on blah blah blah. As long as they're loyal and committed to improve, and we're all on the same page moving forward, it's going to be successful. And that's how it was in the military. In military, small unit leadership, and it's very similar in entrepreneurial businesses. And also, if you scale a business to large, you still need that on your teams.
That's right. I'm going to get to the reveal, but I want you to finish the story that you were just getting ready to start with your dad and your uncle bringing you.
Oh, so yeah, I came to the business and I worked in various leadership roles. So the facility that I was the nighttime warehouse manager of, I ultimately I ran that division of the company.
Okay.
And ran a couple other divisions. Now, the company was relatively large, so we had 250, 300 employees. Divisions here in Oceanside, farm in Carlsbad that still exists, the flower fields.
Love the flower fields.
Downtown LA facility, Orange County, Carlsbad, maybe one more, Vegas. So different divisions of this company, and we were somewhat professionalizing the business. I've been there about 10 years, and we decided to bring in outside directors.
Okay.
So it's family owned. I think there's 11 or 12 shareholders, of which I'm still one of them. And we decided as a group that, we had family members on the board of directors. We wanted some professional outside business. So we sort of came in, and then that group ultimately selected me to become the CEO.
Nice.
So I ran that business for close to 10 years.
Was there a lot of infighting in order for you to get to the CEO?
You've been in a family business, right?
Yeah,
so you know how it is.
Yeah.
It's perfect. There's never any fighting. There's never any problems. It's perfect. Everyone gets along perfectly. It's great.
Buddy, Chris, you know Pops. I've always said, and this happened back when I was about 16 or so, first getting into the insurance business with Pops. And I actually had to get a prescription. Part of the prescription was a mouthpiece and some other kind of medication that would help me relax, because I was just grinding my teeth that night. He would bang on the door in the mornings with his rings, like, I'm up, why aren't you up, right? And then as soon as we're coming home after work, he still wants to talk about the business, talk about, there's no downtime.
Get away.
And so that was about 16, and I told my mom, it's the worst manager I've ever had. But now I work with him every day, and we're good. Yeah, we build all the time new business ideas and everything else.
And that's valuable.
Absolutely.
Very valuable.
He started the business back in 77. So yeah, I was born in 74. So we've been doing this for quite some time. But going off into a different career and coming back is actually what helped me get along with him better.
Yeah, because you get some perspective as well, and you bring experience that, wasn't there. Businesses become silos, right? Silos of groupthink. And so it's good to bring in somebody from somewhere else in leadership. It's good to bring in talent, maybe from a completely different. One of the things I did, so I took over as CEO right when the last recession was starting. So 2008, 9. And none of us, looking back, oh, duh. But when you're in it, you don't see it. Kind of like right now. A lot of people don't see what we're starting right now, but oh, duh.
Yeah.
We've all seen it before. It's coming. Be ready, right?
Some of us have seen it before.
Some of us, yeah. Some of us have seen it. The seasoned executives have seen it.
Right.
It's not fun.
No.
But, I did I started to do, I went and got a master's degree in business, right?
Okay.
And I learned about, Lean, Six Sigma, process improvement, process enhancement. Well, I looked at that organization that I'm now responsible for. We have declining sales, declining margins, and increasing costs. What happens to a business that's in that arena? They go broke, right? So we had to immediately figure out, how do we cut our costs? How do we improve efficiency? And so I hired a Lean Six Sigma guy to come in and do a system-wide analysis of the business. We ended up cutting our labor costs, which was one of our major costs in agriculture production. I think we cut it like 15, 17%. We increased our gross margin, not by improving our prices, not increasing prices, but improving our supply chain efficiency, ranks.
Right.
Very low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
So we were able to take that business from when I took it over, it was on cycle to be one of its most unprofitable years due to the recession.
Yeah.
To the following year was the most profitable year in a recession.
I love it.
But it's not easy, and it takes a lot of breaking norms. Well, we've always done it this way. Well, why do you do it that way? Well, we've always done it that way.
Right. You get that a lot in family business too.
And that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah,
right?
Sure. I'm going to throw something out here, and we cut this out if you want to. But I overheard you earlier mention that you're dyslexic.
Yes.
You have a master's degree in business.
Yes.
This is the kind of conversation that is such a good contribution to this show, because when you have folks who have gone through things, they might be on parallel paths as you. This whole story so far, and now they need to know that they can get a master's degree, in business as well, and the different things that are out there for them.
Yeah, and in college and in graduate school, there's a lot of writing. And we were talking earlier, the typos, right? I don't see typos. So I can write a paragraph of content, and I can read it 100 times and I won't see a typo. Now, software today, very helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
But still not perfect.
Yeah.
Right? And so in college, in graduate school, and in business, I've always had either somebody I was dating at the time or an assistant that I'll write something and be like, here, clean the, help me. And that's kind of what I've used as a way to overcome my inability to see my own mistakes in writing. And so, that's my coping mechanism.
I love it, man. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Okay, time for the reveal. With his experience in agriculture combined with the medical needs of people around him, he realized the impact that he could have on the cannabis industry. Mike Mellano is the founder and CEO of Coastal Wellness, a dispensary here in Vista currently expanding, soon to be boasted as the largest cannabis dispensary in San Diego County. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So, tell us a little bit about growing from that family business into the business that you're in now.
Well, so, you're talking about 2015, 16, the cannabis laws were being discussed at the state level. So we were talking about the state was talking about making a change to the old Prop 215 and SB 420 that originally, 20 some years ago made medical cannabis available to the state of California. First state in the union to have medical cannabis available. And I had no interest in any of that growing up. I never had used cannabis. Didn't care about it. Didn't care if people did. Most of my friends did. Many of my friends growing up were growing it honestly.
Okay.
But it just wasn't a thing I was too interested in. But, fast forward, I'm in the ag business. All the laws are changing. Cannabis, the plant, is a flower.
Sure.
And I saw a perfect parallel between Mellano and Company, large ornamental cut flower grower, and cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
So we had the skill set to scale efficiently very large production.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was seeing in cannabis was very fragmented. Little growers here, this little guy over here. And there was nobody that was bridging the gap of the cannabis world plus large scale ag. So I kind of saw that as an opportunity.
Yes.
I made a presentation to the board of directors of Mellano to say, hey guys, this is coming. The laws were in the process of being changed. It hadn't been changed yet, but I said, this is coming. It may be viable for us to look at an alternative business, set up a new company and run in parallel to try and explore this. I was going to present it to that business. They were not really interested in it. It was a little bit ahead of most people's time.
What was the pushback? Was
it's illegal. It's this.
Okay.
We don't want to tarnish the brand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't illegal, but it would, if people found out that this company that's been in business for 75, 80 years is now going to be growing weed, there was issues with that. And,
sure.
I said, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
All true. But that's still a big opportunity, right? So opportunities are messy sometimes.
Mm-hmm. What year was this? What you say, 15, 16?
16-ish, probably 17-ish.
What would you do, Chris? Like if this was pitched to you back in 15, 16, we have an opportunity, we'll start a cannabis business.
Well, I think that would have been an interesting proposition. I probably would lean toward it because I've been an advocate for legalization for a long time.
Okay.
So I'm all for it. And I think, from a medical standpoint, there's a lot of good arguments to make it legal. And there's a lot of people in jail right now that should not be there.
Mm-hmm.
But question I had for you was, could you have created the dispensary and the cannabis side separate from the family business? Or was it just too logical for you to do it that way? If you had pushback from the family, could you have done it as a separate entity?
Well, that's what I ultimately did. I left the company and did it on my own.
Okay.
And I didn't start out in the retail space. My first focus was cultivation because I had no retail skill set. So what? I don't want to start. Oh, I want to get a.
You got to know your limits.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. And yeah, you can hire somebody, but back then it's not like you could put an ad in the paper to say, I'd like to hire a general manager for a cannabis dispensary. They wouldn't take the ads. This is only 4 or 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So I focused on cultivation because number one, it's a skill set I had, large scale ad. I knew how to scale it. And number two, I had a very clear path on you had to get the cities to allow it. So I did a lot of political work in the city of Oceanside for them to, they formed an ad hoc committee to study it. And myself and a couple other friends worked with that committee to get them to pass an ordinance in the city of Oceanside to allow for commercial cultivation under the new regulations that were being proposed and passed at the state. We were successful in that. So I initially got a cultivation license in the city of Oceanside. I still have that license. I have not developed it yet, but I still have a cultivation license. While I was doing that, I started to build a network. Network is everything. Who you know, and especially in cannabis in early days, because there was no trade associations. You couldn't go to a convention and meet people. All that came, but when I started, it didn't exist.
Right.
But I also wasn't involved in the Prop 215 black market days previous to that. So, I'm sort of like on this, at the beginning of the transition to cannabis is when I jumped into it. And so I started meeting people. I started growing a little, and I didn't tell anybody. So I'm still in my real day job. I'd never grown a cannabis plant in my life. And I went to one of those grow places that sells the grow supplies. And I said to the guy behind the counter, I'm like, hey, where can I get some like really good tomato plants? And he goes, oh, we're not allowed to talk about any of that here. And I'm like, yeah, but if you could talk about it, like, who would you say I should call? It's like, and we went around on that for a couple of times. I'm like, look, man, all I need is a phone number. So I gave him a piece of paper and he wrote a name and a number down. So I ended up calling those people and I bought 15 plants.
Okay.
Well, I got a medical recommendation. You could have 12 vegging plants legally and 6 flowering plants. So I bought 15, figuring I'd kill a few. Ended up growing a crop of cannabis outside in the middle of my avocado grove in the county. And it was horrible, like almost unsellable, because I didn't know what I was doing. Weed is really easy to grow, but high quality is not easy to grow. So I had to learn that stuff. And I figured it all out. Ultimately had a Prop 215 compliant greenhouse and grow room that I was going. But in the meantime, Measure Z and Vista was spinning up.
Right.
And in my little network that I'd created, I had met a few people. So we kind of got involved with the politics of the city of Vista to get Measure Z on the ballot, get it passed. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to miss this opportunity, even though it's not my strong suit. But again, still have no idea how to do retail. A friend of mine, we were talking one day and she's like, oh, I know this person who like runs dispensaries. And I'm like, oh, I want to meet that person. That's how I met Amy, my general manager. So our mutual friend connected us. And again, this is now almost 5 years ago.
Wow.
And Amy and I met for a drink at the Beaver in downtown Vista, Belching Beaver. And that's where we met. And I'm like, it's crazy. Do you want to do this? And she's like, maybe. So we stayed in touch as I developed the plan.
Right.
And then we got down to, I got a license and we're still talking. And then her and I worked on the project almost a year before we opened. Like she was helping me how you do certain components. Because again, I didn't have any knowledge of how you operate a retail dispensary, but she did. She'd been doing it since she was 18.
Yes.
Hello friends, I'm Joe Samo. I'm an attorney in San Diego and I'm the host of Run It By My Lawyer. It's a great podcast where you will learn a lot about the law and it is very entertaining if I say so myself. And you can get it for free anywhere you get your podcasts, and you can follow us on Instagram at Run It By My Lawyer.
The Film Hub is the future of co-working in downtown Vista. Get energized in an inspiring work environment that is built for your success. With multiple membership options for workspace and private offices, you can become a part of our co-working community. The Film Hub makes it easier to produce the professional content your business needs. From video production, live streams, photo shoots, or in-person events, you can create all this and more in our audio and video facilities. Love your work and where you accomplish it. The Film Hub.
I'm Z Corley, host of the newest show on A Different Day Radio, Network One-on-One. Those who know me in business know that I put a lot of effort in connecting people that I believe should meet. One of the best ways to grow your business is networking, but some business have the toughest time doing it. Our new show, Network One-on-One, puts two people who may or may not have met across the table from one another. Here's the thing though, I will be hosting from another room. I'll be throwing prompts on the screen, allowing our guests to get to know each other. By the end, we hope to have made a connection. Subscribe to the newest podcast on A Different Day Radio, Network One-on-One. Find us on all podcast platforms, including YouTube. Don't forget to leave a comment. Network One-on-One.
So we ended up doing what is now Coastal Wellness.
Yeah.
And, it's a long process, right? Permits, all the stuff you have to do to build a business. And then a cannabis business is a whole nother layer on top of that.
Right. And you started off medical.
Medical only. The city allowed for medical initially. So all the patients had to have a medical recommendation. So, that's kind of a barrier when there's San Diego adult use. I can just go down to wherever and yeah, it's true. Or I don't want to be in any system. Like there's all those, all those things. So barrier to sales for sure. But, and here's the other issue. We opened that shop on February 27th, 2020. And what happened 2.5 weeks later?
Oh yeah, sure.
COVID lockdown. COVID lockdown.
Absolutely.
Now, we were allowed to operate as an essential business. However, that entire area of Twisted Horn, all the other breweries. There's 20 breweries within a mile of my shop.
Yep.
And the business park traffic. The first 3 weeks we were open, we're getting a lot of business from that.
Yeah.
Well, then like that whole part of town's a ghost town. And, the employees are scared. I had a meeting with everybody and I said, listen, I don't know what's happening here. Like, I don't know if this threat is legitimate or if this threat is overblown. I said, I tend to feel like it's a little overblown because I understand psyops and, when you see every single media personality, politician, when you see a narrative that is parroted by so many people, I don't care what that narrative, whether I agree with it or not, I'm like, let's see what happens here. I'm a little suspicious of all that. But either way, we were scared. None of us knew what was going to happen. People were running to the supermarkets. You couldn't get certain supplies. You couldn't get toilet paper. Groceries. People were like, and I had a meeting with all my staff. I said, listen, if you want to work, we're going to be operating. If you don't want to work, that's no problem. We'll have you back whenever you want to.
Yeah.
No one's going without food. No one's not going to, we will collectively make sure we take care of each other.
Right.
And we did that. Like, a couple people were here on the West Coast. All their families were on the East Coast. They were very scared. So we just all took care of each other and made it through. Now, business was very slow for me because a couple shops, I was the third shop opened in the city, I think, maybe the fourth, I can't remember. But the March and Ash is right up the street from us, had been open several months.
Yeah.
Well, when people are scared, they don't change behavior patterns.
You're trying to woo them to you,
but it's not. You're not. It's a challenge, right? So we just kind of made it through. We worked. I mean, my team, we all worked together, and there were some times where it was just me and Amy working, open to close.
Sure.
Because cash was tight. I got to make payroll. Sales were slow. And one day we'd been open about a month or two, and it was kind of like we're now, lots of rain. It was an evening time, it was dark. I walked up to Sycamore at the intersection of Sycamore La Mirada, where my new building is. And I'm like, I'm going to stand here until a car drives by. Now that intersection is a 40,000 car a day intersection.
One
right?
of the busiest.
It is one of the busiest ones in Vista. So I go up to that intersection and I stood there for 12 minutes before a car went by. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
So then I stood there in the rain. I sulked back to the shop. And I'm like, man, this sucks. And then I was in my office sulking. And I'm like, what did I do? What am I doing? Why did I do this? Am I the dumbest person on the planet? Like all those things.
Yeah.
And then I sort of had this thing of like, you know what? If this whole thing fails, I'll just do it. Because if you do something once, you can usually do it again. So I kind of had to reframe my mindset at the time because, being an entrepreneur is tough.
Right.
And lonely sometimes. Right?
Well, especially during a pandemic.
Oh, God, yeah.
And what's interesting is that everyone, I don't know how many other times in the history of the world, everybody on the planet was having the same fears. Every business around the world was probably having some of the same concerns that you were having, and yet it's very personal when you're in your four walls and you and Amy are all alone. There's nobody coming in.
Yeah.
You feel like you're all alone, but I was doing it. You're probably doing it.
Absolutely.
It was a weird time.
Everybody had to reset themselves and be like, okay, how do I succeed here? Because it's not like I had some job where I can now just work from home and get a paycheck.
Yeah.
You have to, when you're in business for yourself, if you're doing insurance sales, you don't, if you don't perform, you don't eat. You don't pay your bills.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so you feel that. And then, but you also feel it for your employees because I'm not only feeding myself and my family, I'm feeding all my employees.
You're taking leadership responsibility.
Yes. Yeah. And it's, and the flower business. So I still sit on the board of directors of that company and we had to shut that company down.
Wow.
So we actually suspended operations of that business for about 4 or 5 weeks until the PPP stuff was announced because everybody that was being talked about, but you have a business within 4 days of that company, a company that can sell a couple $1 million a month in product goes to zero.
Yeah.
Okay. The checks coming in on payables dwindled to zero.
Yeah.
So if you're not selling product out and you're not getting checks in to pay for stuff you've already sold, your cash flow goes away very quickly.
That's right.
No, that's your family's business.
The family business that I don't operate in that. I'm on the board of directors. Right. But that, we shut that business down. Didn't know if we were going to be able to open it back up.
Yeah.
Now, Fortunately, we ended up, the PPP money was announced. A friend of mine was the president of a bank in San Diego. I called him and I said, how do we get this? He's like, we have no idea, but we'll do your paperwork first. And we were one of the first companies to get funded for that. But it allowed us to bring our employees back. It allowed us to spin that business back up and actually make it continue to be successful. But it was a really tough time. And then, and then as things started to improve, and then they did another lockdown. Remember, they opened up and then they did another one. And I don't even have to look at the dates. I can look at my sales data. Like, we're doing this, so here, lockdown. Here, lockdown. It's like, okay, and you just adapt to it.
Right.
Constant adaptation.
It's a wild thing to adapt.
Right.
Lockdown.
So you've got a lot of, I think, it seems like Vista, 11 licenses were issued,
11,
right?
11,
so it seems like a competitive landscape, but you come from an agriculture background, so you probably have the supply chain and the continuity of the quality of what you're selling. Does that give you an edge? Is that different from some of the other dispensaries in Vista, or do all of them grow their own?
No, so we don't grow our own. We source it. Amy handles all the supply chain stuff, and she does a really good job, okay? What I bring to the table is I run it like a real business, and a lot of dispensaries haven't. For example, when our initial staff was a lot of the people that had worked for her in other dispensaries in the old Prop 215, very loose regulations. I think a lot of them paid cash, didn't really pay taxes, things like that. Some of my staff was, okay, this is Carol, my HR person. I'm like, you have an HR person? I'm like, yeah. And Carol has worked for me in other places in the past. We're going to get direct deposit? Oh, we're going to actually get a regular paycheck? Like, they were just amazed at all the, we run the business like a business, and a lot of people don't. The other, I made a decision very early on because of the location. We're not in a very high traffic location in our current spot.
Right.
So what do you have to do to differentiate? High service. Target a customer that appreciates that.
Right.
And that's what we did.
Yeah.
So our demographic is mostly 40+. We get a lot of pain management. I mean, I don't know if we talked about it when you were at the shop the other day, but one of the things that zeroed me in on this was I used to think medical efficacy for cannabis was a bunch of BS. I just thought it was an excuse that people wanted to recreationally use cannabis. No issue with that, because I drank. So what's the difference? I didn't see a big difference. But as I started to do some research, and my mom suffers from rheumatoid arthritis, so very bad joint pain, inflammation.
Yeah.
I had been growing for about a year. Nobody knew. I didn't tell anybody that I was doing this. And my mom comes to me one day and she's like, we were at dinner and my sister and her family was there, and my mom's like, oh, quiet. She waves me over and I'm like, what? And she's all looking around. She's like, what do you know about, I'm like, what? She's like, what do you know about and I'm like, weed? And she's like, shh.
This is the talk, but this is a different version of the talk.
Yes. And so I'm like, well, I don't know, Mom. I know a little bit. I have some friends and this and this. And she's like, oh, a lot of my friends are starting to use it for pain. And, my joints and this and this.
Yeah.
And I said, let me see what I can do. Well, a buddy of mine used to make tinctures and topicals for pain. So I called him up and I'm like, do you have any of your products? So he gave me a tin of it and I gave it to my mom. And she put it on her. She's like, this is amazing. It was a THC topical with other things in it, but amazing results. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then, I got her some tinctures that she could orally take. A lot of CBD-based tinctures, but with a little THC. Amazing results. And so that's when I started to say, okay, there's something to this.
I love it when you tell that story. Yeah, you told me that story at the shop, but I'm glad you told it again.
It's so funny. And till this day, so, my mom's, I think she just turned 87, still uses the topicals and the tinctures. And she's at the shop the other day and she's like, and I was talking to one of the customers and they're like, oh, well, this. And she's like, do you smoke marijuana? And I'm like, oh no, Mom, I just eat edibles like you. I don't. She's like, okay, good. Cause I don't want you smoking marijuana. And of course I smoke a little marijuana. It's my business. Right. But it's so funny that I'm still lying to my parents about smoking weed and I'm 55 years old.
We grew up And there was a long time where we couldn't talk about it. We couldn't do it out in the open. It still feels weird to me, walking down the street and smelling it and thinking, oh, they better be careful.
Yeah.
Wow. No, they don't have to be careful.
No, yeah.
I have a friend who will not come to my shop.
I was interested in you telling stories about like the stigma and
this guy buys. He knows a couple of growers, and he just buys it from growers here and there. And I'm like, man, like the variety, the quality, and it's not a money issue for him. He's very wealthy. He just will not come into a dispensary. And I'm like, come to the shop. Like, look, it's like cornucopia of products.
Yeah, it's not just that, but it's beautiful. It's safe.
Yeah,
like
very.
And so there's just that mindset, that people have, and it's just hard for them to break past that and actually walk into a shop. And all you got to do is show your ID and keep it moving.
Make sure you're 21 and you're good to go. People will still park behind Twisted Horn. Like they won't park in front. Like there'll be no cars in front. They'll drive way to the back over by West Brew or by Twisted, and they'll park over there and kind of walk this convoluted way around and come into the shop. And my guard can see everything on the cameras, right? So we can see the exterior and all the stuff. And it's just so funny, but whatever.
But I mean, seriously though, and I saw some of the crowd that you got coming in there. I mean, it's all over the place, but very, I'm sure very corporate-minded people.
I have medical doctors coming in there, lots of nurses. It's a complete demographic. Everything, teachers, if they're not in a job where they're subject to testing, like CDL truck drivers, certain government jobs where they test you, military, you have the complete cross-section of society. And my shop, again, I don't have a big demographic of the younger. We have some of them that just connect with our shop and really love it. But if you see some of the other shops in town, their demographic is primarily that younger demographic.
Right.
And it's a different model, less touch, more transactional.
Right.
It's not uncommon for one of my bud tenders to spend 30, 45 minutes, an hour with a newer patient, particularly an older patient that's dealing with pain, anxiety. Sleep is a big one.
Absolutely.
We've got cross-section of products for sleep, some products, anti-anxiety products now that are non-psychoactive. So CBG is a new product being extracted from the plant that is anti-anxiety, but no psychoactive effect. So lots of options now for people to see.
Love it. What's the future?
The future is Coastal Cannabis.
I heard that.
So I made the decision about a year ago that, the city changed the rules to allow to move. So initially, here's your spot, you got to have it. Very, very difficult to find a spot where somebody would actually rent a building to you or let you operate. So that's how I kind of ended up hidden away there. I knew a couple of the guys that worked over in that building. It used to be formerly Piston Pete's. And they were in somewhat of a dispute with the landlord on their ability to open a tasting room there.
Okay.
And so, I said, well, and he said he wanted to move. And he said, but I still have time on my lease. I said, I'd love that building. Let's make a deal.
Large.
Very big.
Yeah.
And, but nobody from the company that owned that building would call me back.
Well, I mean, if they didn't want to have a tasting room there, you might be the last person they want to talk to.
Yes. But you know what? I don't care.
Yeah.
Let me talk to somebody.
Yeah.
So I ended up, the company that owns that building is very large. I won't mention their name, but, I think the owner is like a billionaire. Okay. And I called a good friend of mine who runs a large commercial real estate firm. And I said, hey, you have to know Mr. So-and-so. He's like, my best sales rep is in Montana with one of his, I think a CEO or COO in Montana on a fishing trip right now. I said, can you get me a meeting with one of those guys, please? He's like, let me get back to you. So again, your network.
Right.
So the next day, their COO called me and he said, Mr. Mellano, I hear you want to talk to me. And I said, yes, sir. And I said, where are you? I'll come to you. And he said, no, I want to come to you.
Right.
So he drove up to the spot. Not a dissimilar conversation, that was shorter version of what we just talked about. And he said, this is very interesting. And let's not forget, they're going to get a premium rent. So you typically in cannabis pay, 40, 50% above what you would normally get. It's just how it is. So, and they were facing a potential legal dispute with the previous tenant, who, nobody ever wants that, whether you're right or wrong. It's just it's a mess.
Yeah.
And he goes, give me a week and I'll think about it, and I'll give you a yes or no by the end of next week. And I said, I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
2 days later, he sent me an LOI to say yes. And we started the planning phase about a year ago.
That's awesome.
And so that's kind of how we got and then I wanted to rebrand, because originally there were nuances around how you named the business before, and it's way easier now.
Yeah.
And I wanted cannabis in my name.
Yeah.
Because Coastal Wellness is great. People think we're a wellness center or a massage place or a this or a that. And on that intersection, you can put your business name on the building. And I wanted to say Coastal Cannabis. So we've done a rebrand and a refresh of the brand. We are in the final phases of construction right now. We were going to target a 420 opening, but I just felt like it would be a little bit more prudent to push it a week or two post 420. So we'll announce on our social media when all that's going to be happening. But towards the end of the month in April is when we will make the transition. And what we will do is we will operate in the current building. We will close for business. Throughout the night, I have to hire a distribution company to move all the product, the regulated product. I can't move it. The cannabis products will be moved by a licensed distribution company to the new building. We'll merchandise that building throughout the night, and we'll open for business at 9 a.m. the next day. And that's coming. So very exciting time. It's been about a year in the making. My staff, they're amazing. They're very stressed about it, but you know what?
Well, what does that mean, though? I mean, to be the largest dispensary in San Diego County, I mean, it's just huge. You're just going to have a whole lot of product. There's going to be a very large operation there.
It's going to be.
What does that mean?
It's going to be a lot more work.
Yeah,
but it's a lot more opportunity. Right. And my intent is to take the experience that we provide now, very personalized, very specific for certain people, and scale it. And that's not easy to do, because it's easy to do high level service, with 4 or 5 employees behind the counter.
Yeah.
When we have 10 behind the counter, well, hiring's different, but I am confident with my team and the best practices that we've established that we will take the service level that they receive currently at Coastal Wellness and make an easy transition to Coastal Cannabis.
Yeah.
Do banks work with you now, or is that still a problem?
It is a problem. I do bank. However, I had 3 bank accounts, because you just never know if they're going to say no thank you for your business. And that happened to us about 6 months ago. One of our banks said no thank you for the business. And I said, can we work with this? They're like, no thank you.
That's crazy.
You have to move all your money out of here by such and such date. And so, yeah, it's a lot of places don't have banks. There is an extensive background check that happens. You don't just go open a bank account for cannabis.
Right.
It's about a 6 to 8 week process.
Regulatory issues around
for them, but I'll tell you, the fact that we can't use credit and debit cards and bank normally like any other business is nonsense. I mean, there's always the security risk around cash, and we all mitigate it. We get regular armored car pickups and things like that. Sure. But, how about we just do business like everybody else?
Yeah.
But that's a federal law issue.
Crystal ball moment then. Do you see that ever changing on a federal level?
As soon as they can figure out how to give an advantage to the political donors at the federal level, let's call it pharma, tobacco, and alcohol, as soon as they can give them an advantage, it's going to happen. And they'll probably slap another tax, right? So there'll be some sort of a federal excise tax on top of Measure Z city tax, state excise tax, and state sales tax. So the effective tax in the city of Vista on a retail cannabis is 30%.
Zeke and I both came from radio, and we were both probably put out of radio about the same time for the same reason. That was because of deregulation, where, all of a sudden now all these little mom and pop radio stations got bought up by these big companies because the FCC opened up. I could almost see the same thing happening if they remove federal regulations or restrictions. Then Big Pharma is going to come in and scoop you guys up.
The big money is going to come. And so we were talking earlier about an exit.
Yeah.
Whenever that happens, I will likely exit because you'll have no choice.
Right.
I'm not going to compete against a pharma company that literally has blank check billions. of dollars.
Right.
Alcohol, tobacco, and pharma, they have so much liquidity. They've got billions, if not trillions of money in reserve. They'll spend ungodly amounts of money to buy a market that they'll monetize in 20 years.
Hi, I'm Rachel Beld, host of Velocity, the Vista Chamber podcast. Join me as I sit down with Vista's movers, shakers, and changemakers. Let's move Vista forward with Velocity.
They have the money to do that. And I see that happening in cannabis here. I don't know when.
Right.
I thought we would have federal descheduled by now. But until they can figure out a way to tax it and give a distinct advantage to those stakeholders, I don't think it'll happen. And, you know, the political wins, right? It's who knows where, you know, I don't know what's going to happen.
Money wins.
Yeah. That too. Right. Speaking of political, though, you mentioned me coming to your shop. That was really cool to have the city councilman. We were doing a video for you.
Right. That was great.
And having the city councilman coming into the shop, not something that you'll commonly see, and interviewing with you and really just having a brilliant conversation and really showcasing your shop and some of the other dispensaries around Vista. I thought that was cool, and it seems that you had a good experience with it.
Yeah,
I actually gave you a medal.
Coin. I got a coin.
That's
I got
what
the
it
City
was.
of Vista coin,
That's awesome.
No, that was interesting. That was interesting to see. Going back to when I started this work in the city of Oceanside, I took a couple of the council members of City of Oceanside and the deputy mayor. It took some convincing. I took them up to one of the grow operations up in Santa Isabel.
Okay.
Because their mind of what we wanted to do wasn't connecting with the reality of what we wanted to do.
Sure.
But let me tell you, it was not easy to convince 3 city council members to drive up to a cannabis farm on an Indian reservation.
Right.
You know, because the political optics of it.
Sure.
Right. So it's like, you know, for them to come in there and walk into the store and do a video and promote it.
Yes.
But again, I can now put ads on Indeed and various jobs. You know, law firms will actually say they have cannabis departments where 5 years ago, oh yeah, we have this little cannabis, we don't tell anybody about it. All big secrets. Accountants wouldn't work with you 5 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, all the normal service providers that support businesses, a lot of them would not touch cannabis a few years ago, and they certainly wouldn't do it publicly. They wouldn't. And now that's all changing. I get calls all the time, workman's comp, all these insurance people. Now everybody wants a piece of the business.
Yeah.
Because it's mainstream. But I stay with the people that took my business early.
That's interesting. It's interesting that you mentioned insurance. I started writing. Really, you couldn't get them done in California. I was writing in Canada, but I was insuring them here. But I was insuring them, but they did still have to pay full price because they couldn't get financing because the banks weren't working. But you know, they're so advanced out there, and I love what they're doing in Canada. But it was great. They actually came as a referral from a law firm. Okay. And they came to me, but it was great to work with them. So I've been insuring cannabis for many years.
Yeah, now more and more people are jumping on that train.
Yeah.
Which means it's more competitive.
Yeah.
Right? When you have one person that you can get a policy from, name your price. Because you got to have insurance. Right. So you're paying and just an example, the group that owns the building that I'm moving into, you're technically not even supposed to have a mortgage with a bank on a building like that. And nobody really checks that, but they paid that building off. They paid the mortgage off because they wanted to own it outright and not have a potential issue with one of their lending institutions.
Yeah.
And a lot of the operators in town in some of the premium locations bought their buildings because they found a building that was perfect location and they didn't have to worry about a landlord. They just bought it. I didn't have the money for that. So I had to find a landlord that would rent. Yeah. And my current landlord, he's amazing. They've worked with us. When COVID happened, he called me and said, look, if cash flow's tight, don't worry about the rent. We'll sort it out later. So he gave me about a 6 month. I didn't pay rent for 6 months. I paid him all back. Like I was able to then, pay everything and get caught up. But, I did that with that. That's how I made it through. Didn't pay my rent. Didn't pay my electric bill. Paid my employees.
Yeah.
Paid my vendors. I extended my vendor. I'd call them on, look, it's tight. Like I need another 30 days. Like they all worked with me. And a lot of those vendors I still work with today because they were there when I needed them.
Loyalty.
Yeah, and that's how, like, loyalty I talked about earlier, it means everything to me in business.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
I love it. I really appreciate you being here with us.
This is great.
Today,
Thank
Mike.
you for having me.
Yeah, man. It's a great conversation, and you're just such a wealth of knowledge. We got a couple of business lessons we picked up from you, and I know they might sound simple to some, but they are the real deal. One business lesson, you said you can't be successful if you don't work hard. And another one you said is network is everything.
Means a lot.
Let's not forget that, guys. I don't care how simple that sounds. You start building from there. Give us the address to the new shop, if you would.
1084 La Mirada Vista.
Yeah, and a lot of this is changing, right? I mean, so the contact information for when the show airs, can you give us any new information?
You know what we'll do is let me get all the current socials and websites to you. One of the issues with our socials is we're on I think our 4th Instagram because they ban it. So we had built our
because
followers.
of the industry.
Yes, and you just get a term of service notice that we're reviewing your account for terms of service violation. Nothing more than that, and that thing goes away for good.
It's just gone.
So we're on our 4th Instagram, and I think it's Coastal Wellness Dispensary Vista, but I can't remember. Because it's always different. Yeah. But I'll get all that to you. We can put it in the notes.
Absolutely. A big thanks to you again, Mike,
thank you for
being with us, and thank you, Chris, for sitting in and co-hosting.
Thanks for having me. It's fun.
We love it. For our social media, though, you can find us at SameBizPod, SameBizPod, and at A Different Day Radio. Make sure you check with A Different Day Radio and all of the shows we have going on. Our newest show, Network One-on-One, which Chris was a guest on. But we've got the Velocity podcast, Odd Pairing, will be releasing soon with their new season, and they're using our beautiful new talk show set. So everybody just keep staying in tune to everything that we've got going on. We're having a blast doing it and creating this content for you. Like and subscribe, comment, even the bad comments, we accept those as well. But help us keep this thing going. We love you guys and appreciate you. Peace.